The year is 63 BC. Pompey the Great has just taken Jerusalem for Rome. As the fighting settles around the Temple Mount, the Roman general does something no foreign conqueror before him has done. He walks into the temple. He moves past the priests, through the outer courts, into the inner hall, all the way to the veil that guards the innermost chamber, the Holy of Holies. A windowless room entered by a single man on a single day of the year, under conditions of precise ritual preparation. Pompey steps through. What he finds is silence. The room is completely empty. The Roman historian Tacitus recorded the encounter with evident confusion. No image, no object, no visible presence, just a room. Pompey, by all accounts, touches nothing, takes nothing, and gives orders that the temple service continues undisturbed. He is looking in exactly the right place. He is simply arriving 500 years too late. That chamber had been built to house one specific object, the gold-covered chest that stood at the center of Israel's story since the wilderness, and no one has fully explained where it went. This is Bible Stories Unearthed, where we retell the narratives of Scripture alongside the history, archaeology, and ancient world that give them their full weight. Today, the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in the Hebrew Bible, traced from its construction in the wilderness to its disappearance from the biblical record, and every serious theory about its fate examined against what the evidence actually supports. Across the ancient Near East, the idea that a god could be materially present in an object was not exotic. Egyptian temple practice centered on cult images, statues housed in inner sanctuaries and attended in elaborate daily ritual. Mesopotamian temples maintained similar arrangements. When Assyrian armies sacked foreign cities, one of their deliberate acts was carrying off cult statues. Taking a god's image was theological warfare. It meant demonstrating the god's defeat. Israel's relationship to this tradition was specific and carefully maintained. The Ark was never an image. The instructions preserved in Exodus are precise on this point. It was a chest, a container, made of acacia wood and overlaid entirely in gold, with 2 cherubim beaten from gold mounted on the lid, their wings extended to form a canopy above the cover. In ancient Near Eastern iconography, this arrangement carried immediately recognizable meaning. The cherubim formed the throne, divine beings whose outstretched wings bore the invisible king enthroned above them. The wooden chest beneath them was the footstool, the resting place of the deity's feet. 1 Chronicles 28:2 and Psalm 132:7 speak of the Ark in precisely those terms, without metaphor. This was architecture with theological weight built directly into its dimensions. What the chest held was equally significant. Inside were the tablets of the covenant, the stone record of the agreement made at Sinai. In the ancient world, treaty documents were stored at the feet of gods, in temples, because temples were the place where oaths had binding force. The Ark, as the chest containing the covenant document, was the portable version of that entire concept, the footstool of the enthroned God, carrying the treaty beneath it wherever Israel traveled. Understanding what this object represented in Israel's life is the only way to understand why its disappearance from the record is so significant. The construction command comes in Exodus 25, delivered to Moses on Sinai, with specifications precise enough to function as a blueprint. The dimensions are given. The materials, acacia wood, gold, rings, and carrying poles, are named. The cherubim atop the cover receive detailed instruction. The purpose is stated plainly. This will be where I meet you. This will be where I speak. The biblical timeline traces the ark's movements from Sinai through the Jordan crossing, the text recording that the water stopped while the priests stood in the riverbed, through the 7-day silent encirclement of Jericho, and into the early period of settlement in Canaan, where it came to rest at Shiloh in the central hill country. For the years of the judges, Shiloh was where the ark rested, where the tabernacle stood, and where Israel came to seek God. The moment that fractures this settled arrangement comes in 1 Samuel 4. Israel goes out to fight the Philistines at Aphek and is routed badly. The elders make a decision the text records without endorsing. Bring the ark from Shiloh into the battle line. When it arrives, the shout from Israel is so loud the ground shakes. The Philistines hear it across the field and, out of fear, fight harder than they ever have. The result is catastrophic. Israel is routed again. The ark is captured in the field. Eli's 2 sons, the priests who carried it, are killed. Eli himself, 98 years old and waiting at the gate at Shiloh, hears the news and dies. His daughter-in-law names the child she delivers in her dying breaths Ichabod, the glory has departed. What follows makes the ark look, in the text's own telling, not like a captured trophy, but like something extraordinarily dangerous to everyone who comes near it. According to the narrative, the cult statue of Dagon at Ashdod is found prostrate before the ark the next morning. Set upright, it is found the following day with its head and hands broken off at the threshold. The text records that each Philistine city that receives the ark in turn is struck with plague. The ark is not behaving like a prize of war. It is behaving like a threat. The Philistines do not keep a trophy that kills its hosts. They return it. They place it on a cart drawn by 2 cows that have never been yoked, point it toward Israelite territory, and watch. The cows walk straight to Beth Shemesh without turning aside. From there, the ark travels to Kiriath Jearim, to the house of a man named Abinadab on the hill. It stays there for 20 years. David eventually brings it to Jerusalem, but not without his own encounter with the ark's dangerous character. On the first attempt, a man named Uzu reaches out to steady the ark as the cart lurches and dies on the spot. The text does not explain this further. The ark rests at the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months before a second procession carries it successfully into the city, with David dancing before it in a linen ephod, his wife Michal watching from a window and despising what she sees. In 1 Kings 8, Solomon completes the temple, and the ark is brought into the Holy of Holies by the priests. When they withdraw, the text says a cloud fills the entire house, so dense that the priests cannot stand to minister in it. Solomon's dedicatory prayer names the paradox the ark embodies directly. The heavens themselves cannot contain God, and yet he has said he will dwell here, in this room, above this chest. For the next 3 to 4 centuries, the ark stands inside the temple. The rituals of the Day of Atonement center on the high priest's single annual entry into the room where it rests. And then, gradually, its presence in the narrative fades. The last direct mention in the Hebrew Bible appears in 2 Chronicles 35:3 during the reign of Josiah, king of Judah from approximately 640 to 609 BC, in the context of his sweeping religious reforms. He instructs the Levites, "Put the holy ark in the house that Solomon built." Some scholars read that phrasing as a restoration order, suggesting the ark had been removed from the temple during the syncretic reigns before Josiah, Manasseh's in particular, which 2 Chronicles 33 describes as filling the temple courts with foreign altars and objects of worship. Others read it as a straightforward administrative instruction with no such implication. What all readings share is this: after Josiah's death in 609 BC, the ark disappears from the biblical record entirely. Then comes 586 BC. The Babylonians breach Jerusalem's walls, burn the temple, and carry away its furnishings to Babylon. The records of what they took are preserved in careful detail in both 2 Kings 25 and Jeremiah 52. Bronze pillars, the bronze sea, lavers, pots, shovels, snuffers, bowls, censers, the gold and silver vessels of the inner sanctuary. The Ark of the Covenant is not on either list. The most sacred object in the building, the reason the building existed, is simply not mentioned. That silence is where every theory begins. The silence of those Babylonian looting lists is a historical vacuum, and history abhors a vacuum. Into that silence over the last 2,000 years have rushed theories, legends, and claims spanning 3 continents. None has produced a splinter of physical evidence. But looking at where people have searched, and why, reveals exactly how much weight that single absence has carried. 4 serious proposals have circulated across scholarly and popular discussion. The oldest and most culturally significant is the Ethiopian claim. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church holds that the Ark rests today in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum, brought there by Menelik I, held to be the son of Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, following a visit to his father's court in Jerusalem. The primary source for this narrative is the Kebra Nagast, whose received form dates to the early 14th century AD. It is not an ancient document. It draws on traditions that may be older, and the Solomonic dynasty of Ethiopia traced its political legitimacy through it for centuries, giving the text enormous cultural and religious weight within that tradition. As historical testimony about events in the 10th century BC, however, it is separated from those events by more than 2,000 years of transmission. Edward Uhlendorf, who studied both the Kebra Nagast and Ethiopian Jewish practice in depth, treated it as a work of major literary and theological importance within Ethiopian Christianity, while declining to read it as historical evidence about the Ark's physical movement. The guardian of the reliquary in Aksum lives in proximity to it for life and cannot grant external access. The claim is meaningful within its own tradition. It cannot be assessed as evidence in the historical sense. The second proposal involves Egypt. Shishak's raid on Jerusalem in approximately 925 BC, recorded in 1 Kings 14:25 through 26, and confirmed by Shishak's own victory reliefs at Karnak, stripped the temple and palace of their treasures. The biblical text does not specifically name the ark among the items taken. Popular treatments have placed it at the Egyptian site of Tanis. No excavation or document supports this location. The third proposal comes from 2 Maccabees 2:1 through 8, a text from the late Second Temple period. written in the 2nd or 1st century BC, deuterocanonical in several Christian traditions but outside the Hebrew canon. It claims that the prophet Jeremiah, before the Babylonian assault, concealed the ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, the mountain from which Moses viewed the promised land before his death, sealed the location, and declared that it would remain hidden until the final gathering of God's people. 2nd Maccabees is a significant historical source for the Maccabean period, but mainstream scholarship does not treat it as reliable historical testimony about 6th century BC events. The fourth possibility, that the ark was hidden beneath the Temple Mount before the Babylonian assault and remains there, is the one most consistent with Jerusalem's present political geography, since the Temple Mount has not been and is unlikely to be systematically excavated. Certain rabbinic traditions preserve accounts of hidden chambers beneath the temple floor, suggesting that awareness of such spaces persisted in post-biblical Jewish memory. These traditions are not evidence of the ark's presence there, but they have contributed to sustained scholarly and popular interest in the possibility across centuries. The mainstream historical assessment is this: if the ark survived until 586 BC, destruction by fire is the most logical outcome. A wooden chest covered in gold, consumed in the same burning that took the temple's cedar paneling and gold fittings, would have left nothing to inventory. The absence from the looting lists is consistent with this, though it is equally consistent with earlier loss. A significant thread of critical scholarship argues the ark may have been stripped, destroyed, or lost before the Babylonian assault, during Shishak's raid, or during the syncretic period Josiah spent his reign attempting to undo. The debate about how long the ark actually survived is genuine and unresolved. The one piece of direct, independently sourced evidence from the Second Temple period is Pompey's entry in 63 BC. Whatever the returning exiles rebuilt, they rebuilt it without the ark. No source from this period, not Josephus, not any surviving text, places the ark inside Herod's temple. Whatever happened to it happened before the exile ended. The biblical writers tracked the ark with extraordinary precision across 6 centuries. They recorded when it moved and when it stopped, when it was captured and when it came back, when the cloud descended over it, and when men died for touching it. They described its construction in precise, reproducible detail. And then they wrote the fall of Jerusalem, in full with complete inventories, and said nothing about the most sacred object in the building. There is no rescue in the text, no final line that says it was carried to safety. But in the same period as the temple's destruction, the prophet Jeremiah includes a striking passage in chapter 3. In the days of restoration, he writes, "The people will no longer speak of the Ark of the Covenant. It will not come to mind. It will not be missed. It will not be replaced." The text does not treat the ark's absence as an open wound waiting to be healed. It treats it in some sense as a threshold already crossed, the end of one form of something, though not the end of the thing itself. Whether the chest burned in 586 BC lies sealed in a cave on a Jordanian mountainside, or rests in a room that no outside eye has entered in living memory, the literature of the exile moves on from it with a composure that is its own kind of statement. What that statement means is the question the text leaves open. Thank you for being here. This story has been told, subscribe, and return to Bible Stories Unearthed. The book is open. Let's unearth more.